You guys hear me? Hello, hello? Can you guys hear me? I'm assuming you guys can hear me now. Can you hear me now? You can hear me. Alright, there we go. I was about to say, what's going on here? Sorry about that, guys. Sorry about that. My apologies. Don't know how that ended up happening that way. But hope everyone had a good day today. Sorry about that again. I don't know exactly what went on there. I was unplugging the mic and I'm like, what's going on here? Appreciate you guys being patient. But I was gonna say the only thing that's kind of worse right now than futures right now are the Indianapolis Colts winning right now. I think that's the only thing. Carson Wentz is actually outplaying Baltimore right now, which is pretty sad. And futures are just looking pretty much ugly right now. So Nasdaq futures are pretty much just showing us a nice little bear flag. As we see, we're gonna get right down to the support on the bear flag on Nasdaq futures. And so that line in the sand in which I'm gonna look to see us break down is gonna be 14,537. And so I'm gonna look to see support break down there, and then we'll likely get the breakdown of the low of the bear flag here, right down to the low of 14,367, and then we'll see a little bit more of a lower than that, because like we said, we're gonna see lower highs, lower lows, and then we'll get the retest, which will likely come in the morning. So this gap down will likely progress overnight. If we end up getting some kind of bad news tomorrow morning, then it's going to be likely even a worser, pretty much downtrend for this matter. I want to say gap down because if we get news in the morning, then it's going to be a pretty much a bloody day tomorrow. If we don't get any kind of news that pretty much progresses this downtrend, then we're going to basically break the low of this bear flag, and then we'll get a nice little retest probably tomorrow morning, and which then probably around lunchtime or so, then we'll see the continuation of the downtrend in which we sell off. All right, that's pretty much what we had today, in which it wasn't really necessarily news based today. So we'll likely see that gap down, break the low of the bear flag, retest by morning, and then continuing the downtrend as you basically get lower highs, lower lows in the continuation of that. All right, so that's what I'm looking at for Nasdaq. But again, the line in the sand right now that I'm looking at overnight here to break on this support level of the bear flag is 14,537, and that's the level that I'm looking at. Now S&P futes pretty much a little bit more of a wedging formation is what I'm looking at. As we see, it's pretty defined, as we have that resistance level that we've now tested 4 times. If you include once, twice, 3, 4. This one we didn't quite extend to that resistance, and then we tested the support level around the same time, around 4 times. So as we continue to push this down, it's likely that we're going to test the low here of this channel, of this wedge. And so we're going to continue to see that follow suit with Nasdaq leading this downtrend. Okay, and what actually is noticeable a little bit more tonight than previous nights is that S&P is actually declining with Nasdaq tonight. Right, what we've actually witnessed more so in the past few days is actually the Nasdaq actually pretty much bleeding out and the S&P actually holding up for the most part. That's not really the case that I'm looking at tonight. So we're going to continue to actually see this overnight. I'm really going to be inclined to say that there's going to be some kind of news tomorrow that's either going to give us some kind of relief tomorrow, or it's going to make matters even worse, in which this downtrend is really going to get bloody, more than what we're seeing right now. But that's just a speculation as far as news coming out tomorrow morning. But other than that, we're following the trend. We're following the pretty much the downtrend. There's nothing here that necessarily says that we're going to end up breaking this uptrend just yet. But in the near future here, we'll see. We do need to get out of this scenario of those lower highs, lower lows. That's a scenario that we really need to get out of in terms of the larger time frames, as you see on the 2 hour here. Okay, so that's what I'll be looking at, but I'm likely inclined to say that we're going to get down to this 426 level right around sooner rather than later. Could it end up happening tomorrow? Again, I think that's going to have to be really news based to really push down right down to those lows there of this wedge. But anything is possible at this point, because right now tech is really showing its weakness right now, and we saw that pretty much for a lot of the day, other than Tesla. All right, just a few names, of course, starting off with Tesla. That was the one that actually showed pretty much a lot of relative strength compared to what the overall market was. We have that what you would say is a little bit of a rising wedge action. We have a little bit of a inner wedge that's going on here, in which we see that we actually held a perfect uptrend here. We had a nice little wick that formed our resistance, and so I'm inclined to say that this is going to end up testing the top of this rising wedge if the market doesn't flush as much as we expect it to by morning. And I know that Dapper, if you guys are familiar with Dapper on our live as well, he's actually bullish on Tesla as well. And if I'm not mistaken, Dougie as well. And so our overall price target is between the range of 820 to 830 overall, big picture on Tesla. Now, to test the top of this rising wedge, will be right around that 820 mark is what I actually have. And so that's what I'm actually looking at compared to the overall market. Again, you're looking for the relative strength amongst all the weakness in the market. Okay, so this is one that I do have on my watch list. We'll see how this reacts tomorrow. Another one that I saw actually had relative strength compared to the market as well was LMT. If you guys caught this one on my Twitter, I posted it yesterday night. And so we had a nice little descending channel. And this one's actually a rare breed because you actually have an invert head and shoulders on this one, along with the breakout of the descending channel. And so I'm going to watch for a continuation on this tomorrow. We're going to enter a nice little gap fill here right around that 360 mark. 360.88. Above that, we're going to enter that gap fill. And so I'll watch for continuation on this one. It could thrive even if we do have some type of bloody market here tomorrow. And so that's why it is going to be on my watch list tomorrow. Another one that continues to be on my watch list is UPST. It has a beautiful flag. As we see, that's pretty much the inverse of what Nasdaq Futures look like right now. And so we'll see if this one can actually hold up and break the resistance for UPST. Over that 315 mark was really what we were looking at, but it didn't end up happening. So we'll watch to continue to hold that level and then get that continuation. We weren't able to hold it. Alright, so we'll see if we get over that 315 and hold it, and then 323 would be that ballpark target that we're looking at. Alright, so that's one that I also have on my radar for tomorrow. Another one that's actually been on my radar. If you guys remember, this one's been on the newsletter. I believe Tamakaze also had some kind of alert on it not that long ago in the recent weeks. And so this one actually has a beautiful ascending channel. And as you see, you have a nice rounding bottom here. And I'm looking to actually hold that 270 level. As you see that red outline right now, that's really my supply zone right now. And so I want to make sure that we end up holding that 270 level to continue this uptrend. And that's what I'll be watching tomorrow. As you see, it did close green despite how the market sell-off was towards the end of the day. And so that does show me a little bit of relative strength compared to the overall market. Okay. Another one that's on watch, of course, this one's actually on watch for a lot of those Bitcoin players out there. But Coin did have a nice move today. We actually saw that pretty much back to back. That we had those gap ups. We created a gap here, another gap here. And so I'm looking for this line in the sand in which you see that pink line. I want to see this level actually hold. So that level that I'm looking to actually hold is right around that 255 mark. Just about $1 and change shy. So I want to see that level hold, in which we're likely going to see if Bitcoin does actually move overnight, we'll likely see this gap filled by morning easily. But if it doesn't end up pushing as much as we expect, I know the overall target on Bitcoin was still about 58,000 and change. So if we continue to just trend, we'll likely just see it start to push and just crawl back up slowly. But if Bitcoin really pushes, we'll likely see a nice little gap here, right into that gap fill. Okay, so that's one that I also do have on my radar. Now, as far as a bearish play, this one's actually been on my radar, is PayPal. And this one actually goes along with Square because they kind of play, their movement is pretty much side by side. They do act a little bit similar in that sense. And so what I actually noticed here is that we have a little bit of a rising wedge action. We broke down, retested inside. And so once we end up breaking this recent low that we just made there out of the rising wedge, we're likely going to continue to drop down. And so the level that I was actually watching was right around here, around that 234 mark is what I'm looking at as my overall target. That's not going to be this week in particular. That's not what I'm expecting, but that will be the overall target that I was looking at, that 234 mark. And so we'll see this one likely play out in the downtrend in favor of the market conditions right now. Okay. As far as earnings that are concerned, I am looking at JPM. This was a nice one that actually broke down on a rising wedge. And so as we see, it pretty much bled right out. So I'll be looking for a nice little retest here going right into those earnings. We'll likely see some kind of relief in the market in a certain area. So this may be one that I end up watching. And I'll watch this one for a retest. So maybe get a nice little run up out of this considering how bloody it was today. But just keeping it on the radar, see if there's any banks that are going to have any kind of run up into later into this week here. So that'll be one that I watch tomorrow. Another name as far as tech, and this might be the only real tech stock that I go as far as FANG and so forth, is going to be Apple. If you guys remember, we had that nice little wedge breakout. We ended up getting a nice little gap up out of that breakout, and now we have more so of a expanding wedge. If you want to say it's a megaphone, is what we're looking at right now. And so, in favor of the market conditions right now, it's either that we're going to get down to the low 141 level, or if we end up recovering by morning, then we're looking close enough to that 145 mark of this expanding. All right. So that's pretty much one I will look to see which direction the market favors it for, and that could be a directional play that I'll look at tomorrow. Okay. Another one that it has been pretty much red hot the past few days, for that matter, has been AFRM. I believe SIG actually had a position in AFRM at one point today. I believe it was in calls as probably earlier in the morning, before lunchtime, before that sell-off occurred. But as we see right now, the reason I actually have this one on my watch is because if you notice, you have, I'll go down on the time frame. I think it's a little more defined there. There we go. You actually see a little bit of a left shoulder formation. You had a nice head that was created, in which now I'm going to see if we end up getting the bounce to form the right shoulder, or if we just flush right down. And so that's what I actually have on my watch, is this formation of a possible head and shoulders or a straight flush. And that's what I'll be watching. And so the level that I'm watching for the breakdown will be right around this level of 127 if we end up do flushing. And that's where I'll see where we get a nice little consolidation before possibly a next leg higher. Okay, but this one, considering how much it's actually ran and how hot it's run, it is due for a pullback, so we'll see a modest pullback regardless. We could end up consolidating if market conditions don't progress that much. We could see this settle right around that 129 mark, which would be another $6 move down. Okay, if that just decides to flush right out and not form a head and shoulders. Okay, so I'll keep that one on watch. Two other names that just stood out today was Win. If you guys actually kept up with news today, we actually heard Kramer actually bought Win. Now, I'm actually expecting this to pull back, not necessarily push higher, because as you see, you're likely going to get a retest here of this breakout. And so I would watch this one down close enough to that 87 level, high 87. And so this will be a potential short here. If it does end up holding the support level, then that will be a point in time in which you want to go long on it. All right, and that would be the only place that I will go long on it. I wouldn't necessarily look to go long in this area in particular. If it holds up, I would wait for some kind of retest then to take a long position. Okay, so I just wanted to point that one out. The other one that I know that actually has unusual call volume was also Las Vegas Sands. So this is another one, almost similar situation. You had a little bit of a sideways channel. You had a clean breakout. And so we'll see if this one ends up getting a nice little retest as well. About $1 and change to get back to that retest. And once you get to that retest, then that'll be the level to go long as well, because you are in that gap fill that it just broke out into. So we'll get that retest and then likely complete this gap fill right around that 41.73 area. Okay, so that's another one that you can keep on the radar. Someone did mention Amazon real quick, so I'll take those two requests real quick, and then that'll probably wrap up the chart session tonight. But Amazon has a descending expanding wedge going on right now. It's either we're gonna complete this gap fill down here at the bottom at 31.92, in which market conditions are not gonna pretty much favor the upside, or we're gonna end up breaking this downtrend, in which is pretty much, I would say, it's a descending channel that we're in the formation of, and which we're gonna break that and then end up retesting right around the level of 32.82 to end up pushing higher towards that resistance if market favors those conditions. Okay, so that's one. The other one that you did mention was Moderna, and Moderna is very this one's a little bit, I would proceed with caution. I wouldn't dump any type of money you're not willing to lose in this one because premiums are high also. But what this actually looks like to me is a bear pennant. This looks more so like a bear pennant, and I would say that I would like that formed right around here. And so I would also draw that line right around here. And so as you see, that is more so of a bear pennant in my estimation, in which it's going to continue that downtrend. Now the other thing that's not playing in your favor, although you do have that gap up here, which it didn't necessarily gap up as much as I expected this morning, I'm more inclined to say that it's going to fill this gap down below more quickly than it is going to get up to the gap above. So once you break down around this level of that 271, you're going to end up filling that gap, and it'll likely end right around the level of 261. So that's not necessarily favoring the upside just yet. The news around it is not so pleasant right now. And the actual move that we saw early this morning, that $5 gap up that it had this morning, didn't necessarily hold as well as I expected it to get a nice reversal here. And that's why I didn't like that move. Now, could you continue to chop for pretty much another day here inside of this bear pennant? It's entirely possible. But again, in my estimation, this is a bear pennant. So you have that leg going down. And then once you break support, you're going to have that leg going down again, in which that's likely going to fill right into that gap. Okay? So, again, favoring the downside is going into that gap in my estimation. Okay? But other than that, last quick thing that I was actually going to show everyone, just a quick glance in case you didn't look at this. Let me actually just pull it up real quick. Do I have it here? If it's saved? Alright, no, it did not save. Alright, so I apologize for that. So it didn't save. I actually thought I saved the image I was going to show everyone, but it didn't save. I'll post it in premium chat so you guys can actually look at it. But it was pretty much just a heat map of today, as we saw what was showing relative strength. Another one that I know that was green today was a mat. If I'm not mistaken, the mat was actually green as well. Let me actually take a look on that one. Yeah, so a mat was green. This looks a lot more also like a bear pennant. It's more so, I want to say, yeah, it's more of a bear pennant here, I would say. You have a nice little bear pennant, but it did hold up pretty well considering how much it's dropped. And so I understand why it's holding up as much as it is. But you have a little bit of a bear pennant on this formation as well. But that one was green, so we can see this continue this downtrend and going into tomorrow. That was another one. Other than that, I'm trying to recall the names, if there was any other names that were actually green on the day. Let me actually take a look at my actual full watch list. What I actually had that was green. Tesla was green. Of course, GME was green. I don't think there's anything much to chart here on GME. As we saw, it did break that downtrend. My overall big picture is pretty much a wedge going sideways here. And so in which case, if we end up getting some kind of massive breakout here, around that 230 level will be my range here. If we end up getting one last big push out of GME before this entirely does break down, more than likely. Alright, that was one that I was watching. CRM, I did point that one out. The other names that are pretty much up, Baba for the most part, we got a nice push out of that one. I believe someone did mention that we're going to get some kind of retracement. I did see also 180 calls on Baba for the end of the month. So that's something you can keep an eye on. But other than that, the other names here that are pretty much standing out doesn't really look too enticing to me. I know that Dougie's actually watching BYND above this level of the resistance, close enough to that resistance of 105 to 106 here. Then I would actually, BYND would catch my attention. But if it doesn't break that 105, 106 level, then I'm not really looking into that. Baba, I actually was just looking at Baba and I was mentioning that it's likely to get some kind of pullback formation here. As we saw, we had a nice little push right up, and then we kind of got a little bit of a ascending wedge formation here. So I'm looking to see if it's going to break the support to continue filling this gap down, and that's what I'll be watching for. But I actually want to see if it breaks the support or not. But if Baba is up there, like I said, there was 180 calls on Baba for the end of the month. So that makes sense for that matter. But the near term target that I was looking at is right around that 171 level. is what I was looking at if we did continue to see the next push up, the next leg higher. All right, that would be what I would look at, is around that 171 level once we make that next leg higher. But considering we have two gaps below, I'm looking to see if we're gonna completely fill at least one of those gaps, if not both of them. Okay. But other than that, that kind of wraps up tonight's session, guys. We'll see what market does by tomorrow morning. Hopefully, this bleed out doesn't last as much as we're expecting it to, because I do believe that we're going to continue this downtrend. It's not going to get too pretty. There's a lot of correction that needs to be made in the overall market, but hopefully we get some kind of news by tomorrow morning, and that'll give us a better picture of what's really bringing the fair, or what's really going to give us a relief tomorrow. All right. Other than that, though, that kind of wraps it up session tonight. You guys have a good night, and I'll see you guys on live at 9:30 Eastern tomorrow.